The American Dream. I remember hearing about it for the first time during English back when I was in school. Of Mice and Men was the book that depicted this theme, this idea that really stuck with me, that resonated. The ability to work hard, achieve success, change your life. The logic was sound. It reminded me of many familiar Disney stories. That anything you strive for can be achieved. The certainty of it all. So yes, living off the fat of the land, or in the 21st century, your investment portfolio. A dream come true. But with the current state of everything, I've been forced to wake up. Maybe it's just a dream, and it's nothing more. Just a fantasy, a figment of one's imagination, some in-game lore. They say the only things in life that are certain are death and taxes. And once upon a time, I would have put the American dream in this category. But now that just seems naive, because every day something changes, something drastic happens. That's made me dwell on a question, one that you probably have as well. That's in the past, currently does, and in the future has the ability to impact us all. Is the US built to last? For something to be built to last, it needs to be built with sustainability in mind, which is made up of three core components. Economy, environment and social, which is the framework we're going to use to look at the US with. Money is what makes the world go around, and the US holds a paramount position holding the dominant reserve currency of the world, the dollar. Maintaining this status is in its best interest as large demand for the US dollar enables them to enforce financial sanctions on other countries, makes foreign goods less expensive to import due to a strong dollar, and also allows the US to borrow dollars at a cheaper rate from other countries due to the confidence in the dollar and the economy as a whole. But this wasn't always the case, as between early 1700s and the 1800s, France held a dominant reserve currency, followed by the UK up until the mid-20th century, just a little under 100 years ago. We also had a period called the gold standard, where currencies were actually backed by something of value, being gold itself. The US was the last country to stick to this regime until 1971, with other countries like Portugal and Spain also holding the major reserve currency status in historic times. This makes it evident that changes are not only normal but seem to be programmed into the inevitable nature of how the world works. Meaning at some point or another, the US will lose its current status holding the dominant reserve currency of the world and all the associated power that comes with it. So how does this possibly happen? And what does happen to the US when this possibly occurs? There's one word that so easily defines why and how this can happen, and that is oil. Oil is essential to so much of how the world works and operates. So mass amounts of imports and exports are done every day for the heavily in demand commodity. I refer to the gold standard that the US had left back in 1971 when Nixon was in office.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets,
which caused the dollar to crash, but a deal made between the US and Saudi Arabia made it so that trading of oil was done in dollars, which other oil producing countries also followed suit, which coined the term the petrodollar, which has increased demand for the US dollar and as a result solidified its dominance as the global reserve currency. But countries like China and Russia are trying to rapidly move away from this reality, as most trades between both countries is now settled in Chinese yuan, which was first initialized in 2014. As of March 2023, Brazil has also reached a deal with China to settle trades in their currencies and drop the dollar altogether. But it does not stop here. You see, the president of Brazil, Lula, is really trying to urge developing nations to find an alternative currency to the dollar. If countries start to see the benefit of having their independence by using their own currency for trade shown by Brazil in the months and years to come, one by one, slowly but surely, they will start to follow suit, moving away from the system we have right now, which is the petrodollar, and then the dollar as the dominant reserve currency. So what will be the result on the US if this actually occurs? To put it simply, all the benefits mentioned previously will over time be taken away. So the ability to financially sanction countries, cheap imports for the US, being able to borrow dollars at a cheaper rate from other nations. But I think the most significant problem will be the one that's nearly impossible to forecast, the one most people don't see coming. Like the changing of reserve currencies, economic crisis are unfortunately inevitable. Just to paint a picture, in the last 100 years we've gone from the Great Depression of 1929 to 1939, to the Black Monday of 1987, to the recession of 2008, and the one that's so close we can actually touch it, the pandemic of 2020.
The U.S. government is running out of money to pay off the debts it has already racked up. To make the payments and avoid defaulting on those debts.
So if an economic crisis was to occur with an already weaker dollar due to less demand because it's not the reserve currency, the US will be unable to enact all the monetary policy it's used in the past to survive, like quantitative easing, or simply known as the money printing, to provide the required bailouts needed without massive long-term repercussions which can really ruin the economy. All of this hasn't even started to include the massive national debt on the US, which amounts to $31.4 trillion due to a consistent budget deficit each year, adding to the outstanding debt, which also stands to grow at a faster rate if the dollar loses reserve currency status. If we consider the current national debt without increasing it even just a bit, the US is already at its debt ceiling, meaning a restriction on the debt the US federal government can accumulate created by Congress. Any more than this and the US will be forced to default if it's not raised. And in this scenario, honestly, havoc on financial markets is an understatement on what can occur. The environment consists of air, water and land, which us humans, animals and plants live in, and in an ideal world should all work in harmony to help sustain our lives and ultimately our ability to live on Earth. Ideal being the keyword here, as many elements of our environment show signs of being uninhabitable in the short, medium and long term. So much so that people like Elon Musk are working to try to colonize us on Mars. And this heightens when we take a look at US being riddled with so many different environmental problems like air and water pollution, water shortages, and most visible of them all being wildfires. And unfortunately, natural disasters are also at play here, like earthquakes and hurricanes. Water being a basic necessity needed for life is why water shortages and water pollution may be the two biggest problems in terms of environment found in the US. Most people watching this video probably have the luxury of having access to clean water, so it's hard to fathom a country as powerful as the US not having basic necessity like water. One notorious example of not having access to clean water was the public health crisis in the city of Flint, Michigan that started in 2014, where lives were taken due to drinking lead-contaminated tap water found in their residency, and many more were faced with health problems like rashes, hair loss, and heart and kidney disease. And when you start to consider the psychological warfare that comes with knowing you don't even have access to tap water in a developed country, that ain't right. That ain't right. General water contamination also has long-lasting effects on wildlife, crippling ecosystems as animals ingest toxic materials in water, and plants also be negatively affected, which stunts their growth and can cause them to die, which is not beneficial for us as humans as they produce oxygen. Water shortages itself are also visible in places like California, which is extremely critical as California is the #1 state for agriculture in the US, which in a worst case scenario could lead to food shortages across the nation. The social part of sustainability is an interesting one because it's subjective, so open to interpretation and opinions. Common social factors include health, wealth, religion, education level, employment, housing, just to name a few. But many of these in two different countries that are both striving can have two complete different outlooks in the metrics mentioned. A good example of this being Switzerland, a place known for its low unemployment and skilled workforce, And Japan, a country known for its technology advancements and strong knitted communities from the embracement of their heritage. So assessing a country on any social metric might just be unfair, but two metrics that are of importance to any nation is general nation safety and generally just how people feel in that country. Nation safety can be looked at from external influences and internal influences. External being war coming to the nation, internal being things like civil wars or just violent crimes. Looking at war coming to the US, honestly speaking, this is highly unlikely, as the US military power is just something not to be trifled with, ranked number 1 in the world and maintained due to spending billions each year. A civil war also seems unlikely, as the civil war found in the US in 1861 was heavily associated with the atrocities found with slavery of African Americans, where the South wanted to essentially expand slave states, whereas the North of America wanted to limit this, or even in some instances completely abolish this. Now, people say that the 2024 election provides two sides that completely oppose each other, but I don't believe this is enough of an initiative to call for an all-out war within the nation. And regarding violent crimes, data shows that between 1990 to 2021, reported violent crimes actually decreased significantly. But what do the people actually believe about their country? A poll by NBC shows that 72% of Americans believe the US is headed in the wrong direction, based on a margin of error for 1,000 adults at 3.1%. But a simple poll is not always going to dictate what people feel across the whole nation, especially when the question is relatively open-ended. There are also additional results provided alongside the results to the initial question, which now starts to paint a clear and more specific answer to what people actually believe and think. And it seems like the people are just not satisfied. So, knowing what you know now, going back to the initial question and throwing it back to you, is the US built to last? Now, if you made it to this point in this video, then thank you very much. I most definitely appreciate it. Now, when I was trying to make this video, there were so many different avenues and rabbit holes to take. So I know there's a plethora of details that I could have expanded on and even added. So yeah, but that actually is a good thing, because that means there's room to make many more videos. So if you enjoyed this one, then I'll definitely appreciate you sticking around for the next one. But for the extra curious ones of you, you're probably thinking, so what's my personal opinion on is the US built to last? You know what? My personal opinion is that the US is